She walked down the aisle to a lyre rehearsing vows like lines in a play, and everyone bought the act, hook, line, and sinker. The wedding unfolded like a scene ripped from a Hollywood rom-com, or so it seemed to the 200 guests packed into the sprawling backyard of a Waco, Texas ranch house. Under a canopy of soft white fabric strung with golden fairy lights, Rachel Bennett stood in a white lace dress, her hands trembling as they gripped Jason Dalton's. He gazed at her like she was the sun, his voice thick with promises to love her, protect her, stand by her through every storm. She believed him. Every word, every tear glistening in his hazel eyes, every vow etched into the humid September air. That's who Rachel was, a small-town girl from Central Texas who loved with her whole damn heart, who believed in forever, who had no idea the man swearing his life to her was delivering a performance worthy of an Oscar. The crowd erupted in applause, champagne flutes clinked like wind chimes, and the family portraits, snapped against a backdrop of oak trees, beamed with curated joy. It was a lie so polished it gleamed. The truth was already splintering beneath their smiles, but Rachel, swept up in the glow, still thought love could conquer anything. They settled into a modest two-bedroom townhouse off I-35, the kind with creaky floors and a view of the highway if you squinted past the chain-link fence. Rachel turned it into a home, not just a pit stop, but a sanctuary. She scored a sturdy oak dining table from a flea market for dinners together. She hauled in a plush green couch from her mom's garage for movie nights. She painted a nursery pale blue, dreaming of the future they'd whispered about over late-night coffee at the diner down the road. But Jason? He checked out faster than a tourist at a roadside motel. The honeymoon glow barely lasted a week before he started working late at the auto shop he managed. Always exhausted. Always glued to his phone, thumbs flying over the screen like he was texting the damn president. When she brought up kids, the same kids he'd sworn he wanted by 30, back when they'd mapped out Ethan or Lily on a napkin, he'd pivot to the Cowboys' latest loss, some vague meeting, or just go silent, staring at the TV like it held the meaning of life. Rachel, still tangled in the softness of blind faith, told herself it was stress. He'd come around. He always did. Behind every "I'm just tired" was something colder, sharper, meaner. He stopped looking at her the way he had under those fairy lights. His kisses turned into quick pecks, more habit than heart. Conversations felt like dodging broken glass barefoot. Yet she kept trying, simmering his favorite chili with extra jalapenos, leaving sticky notes by his keys. "Love you, see you tonight," waiting up past midnight like a lovesick fool chasing a ghost who'd already left the building. What torched her soul later, looking back, wasn't just the lies. It was the performance. The vows he'd rehearsed, the gentle hand on her lower back as they cut the cake, the inside jokes he tossed out during toasts that had her mom laughing through tears. It wasn't betrayal. It was a calculated con. A man who could sell love like a politician peddling hope on the campaign trail, convincing her, her family, everyone, that she'd hit the jackpot with Jason Dalton. The cracks weren't her fault. The silence at the table wasn't hers to fix. And when she lay awake, staring at the popcorn ceiling, wondering what she'd done wrong, she hadn't yet clocked it. She wasn't failing. He was faking. That realization? It lit a match she didn't know she'd been holding. She found out on a Tuesday in late October, under the flickering bathroom light that buzzed like a trapped fly. Rachel stared at the pregnancy test, 2 pink lines glowing faint but unmistakable against the white plastic. Her breath caught in her throat. The world went silent, save for the drip of the leaky faucet. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the cool tile. One hand pressed her stomach as a tidal wave of emotions crashed over her: disbelief, joy, fear, and a fragile, shimmering wonder. After months of distance, of silence, of tiptoeing around his moods, this was hope. A heartbeat waiting to bloom. A lifeline to cling to in the wreckage. She spent the day plotting. She dug out a tiny white gift box from their first anniversary, back when he'd still kissed her like he meant it, and tucked the test inside. She tied it with a pale blue ribbon she'd saved from her bridal shower, then slipped a newborn pacifier in beside it, a $2 find from Walmart that felt like a promise. Standing in front of the smudged bathroom mirror, she practiced. "We're having a baby," she whispered, voice shaky but lit with a spark she hadn't felt in months. He'd smile, she told herself. He'd talked about baby names over beers at Lake Waco. He'd wanted this. Ethan for a boy, Lily for a girl, scribbled on that damn napkin like a contract. Jason rolled in just after 9, tie loose around his neck, jaw clenched, eyes locked on his phone. The living room smelled faintly of motor oil and his cologne, a mix that used to come for her. Now just stung. "Hey," she said, forcing a nervous smile. "Can you sit? I've got something to show you." He grunted, barely glancing up, but dropped onto the couch, legs sprawled like he owned the place. She handed him the box, her heart slamming against her ribs like a war drum. He opened it, stared at the test, the pacifier, the ribbon, then laughed, a dry, hollow bark that sucked the air from the room and left her reeling. "You're serious?" he asked, voice flat as the Texas plains. Her smile slipped. "Yes," she said, quiet but firm. "I thought you'd be happy." He shot up so fast the couch creaked, pacing the cramped living room like a caged coyote, hands raking through his hair. "You couldn't wait, could you? Had to go and ruin everything." "Ruin," she repeated, the word a punch to the gut. "Jason, we talked about this. We said we wanted this." He stopped dead, spun on her, and looked at her like she was a stranger crashing his party. "You wanted this," he snapped. "I was just saying what you wanted to hear to shut you up." The truth dropped like a guillotine, severing every vow, every late-night whisper, every dream she'd built in that pale blue nursery. Her wedding, their promises, the home she'd poured her soul into. All just lines from a script he'd never meant to live. That night, he crashed on the couch, snoring over the hum of the TV. By morning, he was gone, no note, no goodbye, just the echo of his truck peeling out of the driveway. Rachel sat at the kitchen table, the little white box still sitting there, unopened again, mocking her with its untouched ribbon. The coffee she'd brewed for him sat cold in his favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle he'd refused to toss. Her hands rested over her stomach, shielding the tiny life inside like it was already under attack. Love, she realized, staring at the empty chair across from her, shouldn't feel like begging on your knees. But this was just the opening salvo of the storm. Days melted into a blur of unanswered texts, cold dinners, and a silence so thick it could choke you. Jason didn't come home. Not that night, not the next, not the one after that. When he finally showed his face 5 days later, it was just to grab a duffel bag and a handful of clothes from the closet. "I need space," he muttered, not meeting her eyes, his boots scuffing the hardwood as he stuffed shirts in like he couldn't get out fast enough. "Space," she shot back, voice cracking as she trailed him to the bedroom. "I've been living in nothing but space since I told you about the baby. Space between us. Space where you used to be." He didn't even flinch, just kept packing. She followed him out to the driveway that crisp November morning, barefoot on the cold concrete, tears streaming unchecked down her cheeks. "Please," she whispered, voice raw. "I need you. The baby needs you." He tossed the bag into his truck, then turned, his face hard as the limestone cliffs out by the Brazos River. "That kid's not mine," he spat, low and venomous. "You probably planned this, just another way to keep me from leaving." He climbed in, slammed the door, and peeled out, tires screeching like a banshee into the dawn. Rachel stood there, the wind cutting through her thin sweater, the ache in her chest where her wedding vows once lived now a dull, throbbing roar. The man who'd held her through nightmares, who'd once driven 2 hours in a rainstorm to bring her soup when she had the flu, now treated her like a villain in his own twisted story. Back inside, the townhouse felt like a crime scene. Half his stuff was gone, hangers swinging empty in the closet, drawers yanked open, the faint whiff of his cologne clinging to the air like a ghost that wouldn't leave. On the kitchen counter, he'd left a note scrawled on the back of a junk mail envelope. "Don't contact me. Handle it however you want." No signature. No goodbye. Just absence, hollow and final. Rachel sank to the living room floor, right where they'd once danced barefoot to Ella Fitzgerald on a rainy Sunday, and let the grief hit her in waves. She wasn't just mourning a man, she was mourning a life, a future, a family that had imploded in one silent detonation. Then reality slammed in like a Texas twister. The fridge was down to a stick of butter and some wilted lettuce. Rent was due in 2 weeks, $850 she didn't have. Her health insurance only covered half her prenatal visits, and the latest bill sat unopened on the counter. She logged into their bank app. The shared credit card was shut off, no warning, no text. The walls creaked around her, whispering with every groan, "You're alone." That morning, as the baby fluttered beneath her ribs and an eviction notice glared from the fridge, pinned there by a magnet from their honeymoon, something snapped into focus. Rachel pressed her hands to her stomach, feeling that tiny kick, and made a vow, fierce and unyielding, she'd never beg again. Not to Jason. Not to anyone. She'd been the fool who waited, the girl who hoped, the wife who clung to ghosts. No more. This child deserved a fighter, not a doormat, and she'd claw her way out of this wreckage with her bare hands, if she had to. She hauled herself up, grabbed her ancient laptop from the coffee table, and dusted off her resume for the first time since she'd quit her receptionist gig to build a life with him. She didn't know what she was qualified for anymore, but she knew she wasn't waiting for a savior. She applied to anything she could find on Indeed: remote data entry, part-time proofreading, freelance transcription, anything that could keep them afloat. Every word she typed was a brick in a new foundation. Every click a declaration. She was done asking for permission to survive. That night, just as she was about to shut the laptop, an email pinged in: a small freelance proofreading gig, $10 an hour, 10 hours a week. It wasn't much, barely enough for groceries, but it was hers. A crack of light in the dark. Her second win. She closed her eyes, whispered, "We've got this," to the life inside her, and felt the match in her soul flare into a steady flame. Weeks later, just after midnight on a frigid December night, Rachel jolted awake on the couch, a threadbare blanket tangled around her swollen ankles. She'd fallen asleep mid-email, too exhausted to drag herself to bed after a day of rice and beans meals and job hunting. The fridge hummed its usual tune. Then came the knock, sharp, sudden, relentless. She shuffled to the door, heart thudding, and peeked through the peephole. A man in a dark jacket stood there, holding a thick envelope, his breath fogging in the cold. She cracked the door, chains still latched. "Rachel Bennett?" he asked, voice flat. She nodded, throat tight. "You've been served." He thrust the envelope through the gap and vanished into the night before she could even blink. She shut the door slow, the hallway light flickering like a dying firefly. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at the envelope, willing it to disappear into the ether. It didn't. She tore it open with shaking hands, the paper slicing her thumb in her haste. Inside, court documents, a divorce petition. But that wasn't the gut punch. Jason was denying paternity, claiming she'd deceived him into fatherhood, accusing her of financial coercion, manipulation, fraud. The words swam on the page, each one a dagger twisting deeper. Her hands went cold despite the stuffy heat of the apartment. Her eyes scanned again and again, as if they'd been written about some scheming stranger, not her. Not the woman who'd once loved him enough to imagine raising a kid together under the Texas stars. He wasn't just walking away. He was trying to erase them, her, the baby, everything, and paint her as the villain to anyone who'd listen. She didn't cry this time. The tears wouldn't come because the pain was too sharp, too electric. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was rage, cold and pure, rising from deep in her gut like a wildfire catching dry brush. That night, as the wind howled outside and the baby kicked harder, Rachel paced the living room, the divorce papers crumpled in her fist. She'd begged him once, pleaded in that driveway like a fool. Never again. He wanted to bury her in his lies, to smear her name and steal her child's future? Fine. She'd bury him in the truth instead. This wasn't about saving a marriage anymore. This was about claiming her life and her babies, from the jaws of his cowardice. Next morning, she packed every scrap she had into a manila folder labeled proof in bold black Sharpie, appointment receipts, ultrasound pics, printed texts from months back where he'd gushed, "Can't believe I'm gonna be a dad." She called the courthouse, gripping the phone, till her knuckles whitened. "I need a hearing," she said, voice steady as steel. No stutters. No pleas. The clerk's reply came quick, set for January 15th. "We'll send confirmation." She hung up, fear melting into something harder, armor. Her third win. She wasn't there to beg for his scraps. She was there to defend her kid's right to exist without shame. January 15th rolled and wrapped in clouds so gray they felt like a personal vendetta, the kind of sky that promises a Texas thunderstorm and delivers. Rachel stood outside the McLennan County Courthouse in her black thrift store dress, stretched tight over her growing belly, a quiet but fierce badge of everything she was fighting for. Her boots scuffed the pavement, her fingers clutching the proof folder like a lifeline. Inside, the air was colder than the wind outside, sterile as a hospital ward. Jason sauntered in 5 minutes late, navy suit pristine, smirk plastered on like he'd rehearsed it. A tall brunette clung to his arm, elegant, dripping with quiet superiority, whispering and giggling like this was a date night, not a courtroom. Rachel didn't flinch, just locked her eyes on the judge's bench. Everyone rose as the judge entered, a wiry man with glasses perched on his nose and a no-nonsense stare. Silence fell heavy. Jason's lawyer stood first, voice slick as oil on the brazos. "Your Honor, this is a clear case of manipulation. My client has been emotionally and financially targeted by a woman who refuses to accept the end of their relationship. She's using a pregnancy as leverage. We believe there's no credible evidence he's the father." Rachel stared straight ahead, jaw tight. "No evidence? I've lived every second of this alone. That's evidence enough." The lawyer wove a tale of her as desperate, dangerous, a gold digger wielding a baby like a weapon. She stayed still, not broken, but coiled, waiting her turn. "Miss Bennett?" the judge asked, voice calm but cutting through the noise. "Your response." She stood slow, knees wobbling for a split second before she found her footing. "Yes, Your Honor," she said, low but clear. She stepped forward and handed over her folder, receipts, ultrasounds, texts, including that damning one. "Can't believe I'm gonna be a dad." Jason scoffed from his seat. "She forged all of that," he muttered, loud enough for the room to hear. Rachel turned to the judge. "I've got audio too," she said, pulling a flash drive from her pocket, a backup she'd made of a voice memo from that night. The court tech plugged it in, and Jason's voice crackled through the speakers. "We're really doing this, huh? I can't believe I'm gonna be a dad." Laughter.
Joy.
Vulnerability. All the things he'd buried under his lies. The brunette shifted in her seat, crossing her arms. The lawyer's smile faltered. The courtroom went still as a graveyard. When it ended, Jason erupted. "That's out of context. This whole thing's a setup." The judge leaned forward, eyes unreadable behind his glasses. "Sounds genuine to me. Emotionally, legally, factually." Jason's lawyer stammered for a recess. "Denied." The judge snapped, voice like a gavel. "This court won't be manipulated." Rachel stood taller, her fourth win humming in her chest. The room saw him falter. Truth was louder than his smug little act. The courtroom emptied slow after the hearing, murmurs trailing the stunned spectators, a mix of courthouse regulars and a few locals who'd heard whispers of the drama. Rachel lingered in her seat, hands still clenched around the worn proof folder, ears ringing from the weight of it all. Jason had tried to shred her again. This time, the judge didn't buy it. She stepped into the hallway, legs shaky, and leaned against a cold marble wall, her heart pounding like it wanted to break free. Then she saw her, a woman, mid-30s maybe, sitting quiet on a bench in the corner. Sharp eyes behind wire-frame glasses. Clean black coat. A leather folder resting on her lap, like she'd carried it for years. She'd been in the back of the courtroom, watching, not with pity or judgment, but with the stillness of someone who knew. The woman stood as Rachel passed, her heels clicking soft on the tile. "You don't know me," she said, voice low but steady. "But I know him. I was once in your shoes." Rachel stopped cold, breath catching. "Denise Carter," the woman said, handing her a plain business card, just a name and a private number in crisp black ink. "Call me if you want the whole truth. I've been holding it too long." She turned and walked off, disappearing down the corridor before Rachel could even form a question. That night, after hours of tossing in the quiet apartment, Liam kicking faintly inside her, Rachel picked up her phone and dialed. Her gut screamed this wasn't a trick, even as her mind raced with doubt. They met 2 days later at a diner off Highway 6, the kind with sticky tables and coffee that tasted like burnt regret. Denise didn't waste time. Over a lukewarm cup of tea, steam curling between them, she unfolded a story that made Rachel's blood run cold. "He charmed me too," she said, eyes fixed on the chipped mug. "Talked kids, forever, the whole deal. I got pregnant 5 years ago. Then he flipped, gaslit me, threatened me, said I'd ruin his life. The stress. I lost the baby at 9 weeks. He left me days later.
No sorry.
No nothing." Rachel's stomach twisted, a bitter mix of fury and recognition. "I tried court back then," Denise said, fingers tightening around the mug. "Didn't have the strength or the proof. I do now." She opened her leather folder and slid a USB drive across the table, small as a dime but heavy with ghosts. Emails, voicemails, messages from when he did it to me. I kept it even after I moved on. Didn't know why till I saw you in there. Rachel stared at the drive, then reached out and took it, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from a dawning fire. Her 5th win. She wasn't alone anymore. This wasn't just her fight. "You don't have to use it," Denise said, meeting her eyes. "But I hope you will. Not just for you. For anyone he tries to hurt next." The second hearing hit like a Texas heat wave, heavy, sharp, electric. Rachel wore her black dress, belly prouder now, folder relabeled Truth in fresh ink. Jason sat across the room, suit crisp, smirk dialed back, but still there, like he thought he'd skate through again. His lawyer shuffled papers, exuding forced calm. The judge opened with the paternity results, voice cutting through the hum of the AC. "Court-ordered DNA confirms Mr. Jason Dalton as the biological father." Jason shifted, smirk gone. Rachel exhaled, validation. Her 6th win, solid as the courthouse walls. "Your Honor," she said, standing steady. "I've submitted more, third-party testimony and files showing a pattern of behavior." She handed over Denise's USB drive and printed docs. The tech loaded it up. Jason's voice filled the room again. "I can't wait to have a kid with you. Just you." Emails echoed the same honeyed lies he'd fed Denise years back. Jason leapt up. "This is character assassination. She's..." "Sit," the judge barked, gavel cracking.
Now.
He did, face paling. The brunette, who'd been glued to his side, slipped out mid-testimony, heels clicking a hasty retreat. Whispers rippled through the sparse crowd. Then came the twist. A bailiff stepped forward, handing the judge a sealed envelope marked urgent. The room froze. The judge broke the seal, scanned it, then looked up, glasses glinting. "We've received an anonymous submission, corroborated by county records. Mr. Dalton, care to explain a prior paternity suit filed against you in 2018? Rachel's head snapped toward Jason. His lawyer's jaw dropped. The judge kept going. "A woman named Laura Hensley settled out of court after you paid her to drop it. Same claims, denial, abandonment. Care to clarify?" Jason stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. That's irrelevant. Old news." "Hardly," the judge said, voice dry as dust. "It's a pattern, and this court doesn't ignore patterns." Rachel's pulse raced. Laura Hensley, a name she'd never heard, a ghost from Jason's past, crashing into her fight like a thunderbolt. Her 7th win. The universe had just handed her a sledgehammer. The ruling came swift. Child support, retroactive and ongoing. Court fees on Jason. Emotional hardship noted. He slumped in his seat, smugness drained, as the gavel fell. Rachel didn't gloat. She breathed, long, deep, free. Truth wasn't just loud. It was unstoppable. 2 days later, her phone rang, courthouse registry. "You're approved for a closing statement," the clerk said. "In person or written?" "In person," Rachel said, no hesitation. The courtroom was near empty that day, just the judge, a few clerks, a bailiff. No Jason. She stepped to the podium, a crumpled paper in hand, but spoke from her gut. "I came here months ago terrified," she said, voice steady. "Didn't know if anyone believed me. Didn't know if I believed myself. But truth doesn't need to shout. It needs someone brave enough to speak it. I fought for dignity, for me, for my kid." The judge nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. A clerk smiled. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, Liam's first cries still echoing in her mind from 2 weeks earlier. Labor had hit in the dark of a winter morning. No hand to hold, but a nurse with kind eyes had stayed close. "One more push," she'd urged. And with a final cry, Liam was born, tiny, pink, perfect, a strong-willed protector from day one. 3 weeks on, a knock. Jason's mom, Evelyn, stood there, eyes red, no pearls, no pride. "I was wrong," she whispered. "I let him twist it all. I'm sorry." Rachel let her hold Liam, offering no absolution, just space. A year later, Rachel's life was unrecognizable, not in flash or wealth, but in the quiet power she'd forged from the ashes. Her apartment glowed with warmth, second-hand furniture patched with love, Liam's giggles bouncing off the walls, her voice steady and sure. She'd landed a part-time gig at a Waco Legal Resource Center, not just shuffling papers, but standing at the front of seminar rooms, speaking to women with tired eyes and trembling hands. She shared her folder-marked truth, played the audio clips, read her court statement aloud. She didn't just tell her story. She handed them a torch. One sticky afternoon in June, as she packed up after a session, a woman lingered by the door, mid-20s, hair pulled back tight, clutching a crumpled court summons. "Can I ask you something?" she said, voice barely above a whisper. Rachel nodded, setting Liam's toy truck back on the table.
Sure.
I'm dropping my case," the woman said, eyes darting to the floor. "He's not worth it. I just want it over." Rachel paused, then pulled out a chair. "Sit with me a sec." The woman did, hesitant. "What's his name?" "Mark," she muttered. "Says the baby's not his. I've got nothing to prove it." Rachel leaned forward, voice soft but firm. "I had nothing to at first.
Just a test and a broken heart.
But I found my proof. I fought. Not because he deserved it, but because I did. And my son did." The woman's eyes flicked up, wet with doubt. "But what if I lose?" "Then you lose knowing you stood up," Rachel said. "But you might win. And even if you don't, you'll walk away with your head high. That's something he can't take." Silence hung for a moment. Then the woman straightened, a spark flickering in her gaze. "You really think I can do this?" "I know you can," Rachel said, sliding her truth folder across the table. "Take a look. Start here." The woman left that day with a folder tucked under her arm and a courthouse number scribbled on her palm. 2 weeks later, she called Rachel from the steps of the McLennan County Courthouse, voice trembling with pride. "I didn't drop it. Hearings next month. Thank you." Rachel smiled into the phone, Liam tugging at her jeans. "You did that. Not me." That was her 8th win, not just surviving, but lighting the way for the next one to rise. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the Waco skyline, Rachel sat at her table with Liam asleep in her arms, her legacy folder open before her. She pulled out the tiny white box, the one with the pregnancy test, the pacifier, the ribbon Jason had laughed at, the one that had once shattered her heart. She held it for a long moment, then placed it gently atop the stack of court rulings, ultrasounds, and Denise's USB drive. Not as a scar, but as a torch, the first spark of the fire she'd built, the flame that had carried her through the dark and now lit the path for others. She closed the folder, tracing the word legacy with her finger, and whispered to Liam, "This is ours." She wasn't just a mother or a survivor anymore. She was a damn lighthouse, cutting through the night for every woman who'd been told to stay quiet. Rachel leaned back, drafting her next speech. I was doubted, left behind. I rose. Now I hold the door for the next one. She kissed Liam's forehead, whispering, "You're my turning point." Want more stories of grit and grace? Hit subscribe. Join me as we shine light through the dark, one truth at a time.